Close your eyes for a moment and let your mind drift back to a sun-dappled backyard in Somerville, South Carolina. During the gentle spring of 2008, the air is warm and alive with the rich scent of fresh-turned earth, mingled with the sweet, heady promise of blooming jasmine and magnolia. A soft breeze rustles through the leaves of towering oaks, carrying the carefree songs of birds perched high above. In the heart of this peaceful, ordinary scene stands a 9-year-old girl named Katie Stagliano, small in stature, wide-eyed with wonder, her cheeks already smudged with the dark kiss of soil, and a quiet, radiant joy lighting her face from within. This unassuming third grader is on the verge of planting something that will grow far beyond the boundaries of her backyard, far beyond her wildest childhood dreams. And in time, it will touch hearts she has yet to meet, feed thousands she may never know, and ignite a movement of compassion that echoes across the nation. Katie was never the loudest voice on the playground or the star pupil demanding attention in class. She was simply a child who found her deepest happiness in the world just outside her doorway. Dew caught the morning light like scattered diamonds on blades of grass, the satisfying crunch of fallen leaves under her small sneakers. The sheer miracle of watching a fragile seed push through dark soil toward the sun's golden embrace. Her family nurtured this gentle passion with love and quiet encouragement. Her father, a man whose voice carried the steady warmth of someone who had seen both hardship and gratitude, often spoke words over family dinners that would take root in her young heart. Never waste food, Katie. Out there in the world, people go to bed hungry every single night. Some families depend on soup kitchens for their only real meal. Those words did not frighten her. Instead, they settled softly, like seeds waiting patiently for the right rain, planting the first faint stirrings of empathy and awareness in her soul. One ordinary afternoon changed everything. At Pinewood Preparatory School, her third-grade teacher distributed small cabbage seedlings as part of the Bonnie Plant's third-grade cabbage program. Each child received one delicate plant to take home and care for a simple school project meant to teach responsibility and the basics of growth. But for Katie, holding that fragile seedling felt like receiving a sacred trust. She cradled it gently against her chest, feeling the tender leaves brush her skin, and carried it home with careful, deliberate steps. Her heart fluttering with a mixture of excitement and quiet reverence. In her backyard, she scanned the space with purposeful eyes and chose the sunniest corner, where sunlight poured down in warm, liquid waves. Kneeling on the soft, sun-warmed ground, she dug a small hole with her bare hands, the cool earth crumbling between her fingers like ancient secrets being gently uncovered. She placed the tiny seedling into its new home with infinite care, patting the soil around its roots until it stood secure. Then, lifting a watering can that felt almost too heavy for her arms, she plowed gently stream, watching a droplet sparkled like tiny moons before disappearing into the thirsty earth. Stepping back, she whispered, "Green companion, grow for me. Grow big and strong in those first fragile days." The plant was so vulnerable, barely taller than the span of her palm, trembling at the slightest breath of wind. Yet, Katie became its devoted guardian. Every afternoon, after the school bus dropped her off and she tossed her backpack aside, she raced to the garden, her small feet pounding the path with eager purpose. She checked the soil's moisture with probing fingers, ensuring it stayed perfectly damp but never soggy. Stubborn weeds that dared to steal nourishment were pulled with patient determination, her tiny hands working tirelessly. One evening at dusk, as the sky painted itself in soft lavenders and golds, she spotted deer lingering at the yard's edge, their large eyes gleaming with curiosity and hunger. A fierce wave of protectiveness surged through her. With her family's help, they built a simple fence of chicken wire and wooden stakes, a humble fortress, to shield her growing friend from harm. In the quiet solitude of the garden, Katie often spoke to the plant, her voice a soft melody of encouragement and love. "You're doing great," she'd murmur, gently stroking a leaf. "I believe in you." As weeks melted into months, the cabbage responded with a quiet, almost miraculous determination. Leaves unfurled wider and wider, deep emerald green and beautifully crinkled, forming a heart-shaped head that swelled day by day. Katie watched in awe, first measuring its progress with her eyes, then with a tape measure borrowed from her mother's sewing box. Each new inch felt like a shared triumph, a secret bond forged between girl and plant. By autumn, when the air turned crisp and leaves blushed with fiery reds and oranges, the head had become enormous, 40 pounds of solid, vibrant life, 40 pounds. It outweighed her 4-year-old brother, who giggled with delight as they compared sizes side by side. The entire family gathered around in a circle of shared wonder, laughter bubbling up. Cameras clicking, voices marveling at how something so small could become so mighty. Neighbors drifted over, shaking their heads in disbelief and delight. 40 pounds is ginormous for a cabbage. Katie would later recall, her voice still tinged with childlike astonishment and pure, unfiltered joy. "Sin tat moment, pride swell in Heartland." But joy soon gave way to a gentle dilemma. This colossal cabbage was far too much for one family to eat. It would spoil long before they could enjoy it all. Katie's parents echoed the lesson her father had taught so many times: never waste. What to do with this giant gift from the earth? A spark ignited in Katie's mind, bright and insistent. If her family couldn't use it all, perhaps others could, people who truly needed it. People her father's words had made real in her imagination. With her mother's loving support, they carefully wrapped the massive head in old blankets to cushion it for the journey and loaded it into the car. The drive to Tri-County Family Ministries, the local soup kitchen that served as a quiet beacon of hope in their community, was filled with a tender mix of nerves and anticipation. This wasn't like donating old toys or spare change. This was something born from her own hands, her daily care, her whispered hopes and encouragements. Pulling up to the modest building, Katie's stomach fluttered like butterflies in flight. Inside, the air wrapped around her like a warm hug, the rich, comforting scent of simmering broth, fresh bread, and simmering kindness. The staff's faces lit up with astonishment as they unveiled the enormous cabbage. Gasps turned to joyful exclamations as they touched its leaves in reverent wonder. "This is incredible," one volunteer said, voice thick with emotion. They promised to shred it immediately, simmer it into hearty soup, blend it with rice, potatoes, and love to make every leaf count. Katie couldn't bear to leave. In her soft, earnest way, she asked if she could stay and help serve. Standing on a step stool to reach the counter, ladle clutched in both small hands, she watched from standstead. Men with shoulders bowed by years of struggle, mothers holding toddlers close, elderly women whose eyes carried stories of better days long past, teenagers who should have been in school but instead faced empty tables at home. One by one, they came forward, trays extended, faces etched with quiet dignity. Katie dipped the ladle carefully, heart pounding, and poured steaming soup into each bowl. Steam curled upward like prayers, carrying the earthy, comforting aroma of home and hope. Amer, some surprised by the young server, others softening with gratitude. A small boy clutched his bowl like treasure, whispering thank you so softly, it nearly broke her. An older gentleman paused, placed a gentle hand on the counter, and said, "Bless your heart, child. This means the world." Bowl after bowl, the line stretched on over 275 people nourished by her one cabbage. With each serving, something inside Katie cracked open wider. She had understood hunger, in theory her father's warnings. Fleeting glimpses on the news, but now it was visceral. Alive in the faces before her, the weary smiles, the trembling hands. The quiet thank yous that carried lifetimes of hardship and grace. Tears welled up suddenly, hot and unstoppable, tracing silent paths down her cheeks. She tried to wipe them away with her sleeve, but they kept coming, tears born of overwhelming compassion, of a heart shattering with sudden, profound empathy, of realizing how deeply connected we all are in our need and our kindness. Her small body trembled slightly as she continued ladling, the weight of the moment pressing on her chest. "I was just blown away," she would share in later reflections, her voice still catching on the memory, seeing those faces. Putting real people to the idea of hunger, it changed everything. One cabbage fed 275 people. If one cabbage could do that, imagine how many an entire garden could feed. In that humble kitchen surrounded by the soft clink of spoons, the low murmur of shared meals, the lingering warmth of broth, Katie felt her world expand. The miracle wasn't merely the cabbage's size. It was the alchemy of care turned into sustenance, of a child's love rippling outward to ease real suffering. She had witnessed the transformative power of giving something grown from the heart, how it could fill empty bellies, restore fleeting dignity, spark quiet hope in eyes that had dimmed. As the line finally thinned and the last guests drifted away with full bowls and fuller hearts, Katie stood there, ladle still warm in her hands, tears drying on her face but leaving behind a fierce, unshakable fire. That afternoon marked an awakening deeper than any she had known. Compassion took root in her soul, fierce, tender, unbreakable like the very plant she had nurtured. The question that burned in her young heart wasn't idle curiosity. It was a calling, urgent and luminous. If one small act of love could touch so many lives, what could happen if more children planted, tended, and shared? What if kindness grew like vines across backyards, schools, and communities, feeding not just bodies but spirits too? In the quiet, after the rush, as the kitchen staff hugged her and thanked her with tears of their own, Katie felt the first stirrings of something vast. The seed of a dream had been planted not in soil, but in her overflowing heart, and it was already reaching toward the light, ready to grow into a movement that would change countless lives. The cabbage didn't just grow, it flourished with a quiet, almost miraculous determination, as though it absorbed every ounce of Katie's tender devotion and the golden South Carolina sun. Through the long, humid summer days, Katie's daily ritual became something sacred. A private conversation between a child and the earth. After the school bus rumbled away, she would drop her backpack at the door and race to the backyard, heart already lifting at the sight of her green companion. Kneeling in the soft dirt, she would press her small fingers into the soil around the roots, feeling for that perfect balance of moisture and warmth. If it needed water, she lifted the heavy can with both hands, pouring slowly, deliberately, watching each droplet sink in like a gentle blessing. She never rushed. She savored the moment, whispering encouragements that only the plant could hear. "You're so strong today. Keep reaching for the sky." The leaves answered in their silent way, spreading wider, deeper green, crinkling into beautiful, protective layers that seemed to cradle the promise of abundance within. Her family became witnesses to this unfolding wonder. Her little brother would toddle over, eyes round with amazement, pointing and declaring in his baby voice, "It's bigger than me." And he was right, the head kept expanding until it truly rivaled his size. When harvest day arrived in the crisp fall air, the entire family gathered in a circle of shared awe. Katie stood beside her creation, arms stretched wide but unable to fully embrace it. The cabbage weighed an incredible 40 pounds, a solid, living testament to sunlight, rain, soil, and a 9-year-old's steadfast love. Laughter bubbled up as they took photos, Katie beaming, cheeks flushed with pride, the giant vegetable dwarfing her small frame. Neighbors drifted over, shaking their heads in disbelief and delight. 40 pounds is ginormous for a cabbage. Katie would recall years later, her voice still bright with that original, childlike wonder. Yet beneath the joy lay a deeper, quieter emotion, a swelling sense of responsibility that tugged at her heart. This wasn't just a vegetable. It was a gift too vast for one family alone. The thought of waste pierced her. Her father's words echoed in her mind like a gentle, persistent drum. Never waste food, Katie. Out there, people go to bed hungry every night. Some rely on soup kitchens for their only meal. Those lessons, spoken over family dinners, now felt urgent, personal. Katie looked at the enormous cabbage, felt its surprising heft when they lifted it together, and knew in her bones what must be done. With her mother's encouragement, they wrapped it carefully in old blankets to cushion the journey and drove to Tri-County Family Ministries, the local soup kitchen that had become a quiet beacon of hope in their community. The drive was filled with a tender mix of anticipation and butterflies in her stomach. This wasn't like donating old toys or clothes. This was something born of her own hands, her daily care, her whispered hopes. Pulling into the lot, Katie glimpsed the familiar, building, its doors always open, its light always on for those in need. Inside, the air wrapped around her like a warm hug, the rich scent of simmering broth, fresh bread, and simmering kindness. The staff's faces lit up when they saw the massive cabbage. Gasps turned to joyful exclamations as they touched its leaves in reverent wonder. "This is incredible," one volunteer said, voice thick with emotion. They promised to transform it, immediately shredding it into nourishing soup, blending it with rice, potatoes, and love to make every drop count. Katie couldn't bear to leave. She asked, in her soft, earnest way, if she could stay and help serve. Standing on a step stool to reach the counter, ladle clutched in both hands, she watched so stand steadily. Men with shoulders bowed by years of struggle, mothers holding toddlers close. Elderly women whose eyes carried stories of better days, teenagers who should have been in school but instead faced empty tables at home. One by one, they came forward, trays extended, faces etched with quiet dignity. Katie dipped the ladle carefully, heart pounding, and poured the steaming soup into each bowl. Steam curled upward like prayers, carrying the earthy, comforting aroma of home and hope. Some surprised by the young server, others softening with gratitude. A small boy clutched his bowl like treasure, whispering thank you so softly, it nearly broke her. An older gentleman paused, placed a gentle hand on the counter, and said, "Bless your heart, child. This means the world." Bowl after bowl, the line stretched on over 275 people nourished by her one cabbage. With each serving, something inside Katie cracked open wider. She had understood hunger, in theory her father's warnings, the news glimpses, but now it was visceral. Alive in the faces before her, the weary smiles, the trembling hands, the quiet thank yous that carried lifetimes of hardship and grace. Tears welled up suddenly, hot and unstoppable, tracing silent paths down her cheeks. She tried to wipe them away with her sleeve, but they kept coming, tears born of overwhelming compassion, of a heart shattering with sudden, profound empathy, of realizing how deeply connected we all are in our need and our kindness. Her small body trembled slightly as she continued ladling, the weight of the moment pressing on her chest. "I was just blown away," she would share in later reflections, her voice still catching on the memory. Seeing those faces, putting real people to the idea of hunger. It changed everything. One cabbage fed 275 people. If one cabbage could do that, imagine how many an entire garden could feed. In that humble kitchen surrounded by the soft clink of spoons, the low murmur of shared meals, the lingering warmth of broth, Katie felt her world expand. The miracle wasn't merely the cabbage's size. It was the alchemy of care turned into sustenance, of a child's love rippling outward to ease real suffering. She had witnessed the transformative power of giving something grown from the heart. How it could fill empty bellies, restore fleeting dignity, spark quiet hope in eyes that had dimmed. As the line finally thinned and the last guests drifted away with full bowls and fuller hearts, Katie stood there, ladle still warm in her hands, tears drying on her face but leaving behind a fierce, unshakable fire. That afternoon marked an awakening deeper than any she had known. Compassion took root in her soul, fierce, tender, unbreakable like the very plant she had nurtured. The question that burned in her young heart wasn't idle curiosity. It was a calling, urgent and luminous. If one small act of love could touch so many lives, what could happen if more children planted, tended, and shared? What if kindness grew like vines across backyards, schools, and communities, feeding not just bodies but spirits too? In the quiet hours after that life-altering day at the soup kitchen, Katie carried the memory like a sacred flame deep inside her chest. Those 275 faces, each one softened by a warm bowl of soup she had helped create, refused to fade. They appeared in her dreams, in the stillness before sleep, in the middle of math class. Every weary smile, every soft thank you, every trembling hand reaching for nourishment etched itself into her soul. The question that had ignited in her heart during those tear-streaked moments refused to be silenced. If one single cabbage grown by one small girl could feed 275 people, how many lives could an entire garden touch? How many hearts could be lifted if more children planted, tended, and shared? That question wasn't curiosity, it was a fire. A burning, unshakable conviction that she would not let the moment slip away. At 9 years old, Katie felt the weight of a purpose far larger than herself settling onto her young shoulders. She didn't see it as a burden. She saw it as a gift, a calling so bright it lit up every corner of her being. She began talking, pouring out her dream to anyone who would listen. Her parents listened first, their eyes filling with a mixture of fierce pride and quiet fear. Pride because their daughter had seen suffering and chosen love instead of turning away. Fear because they knew what lay ahead, mountains of adult red tape. Skepticism from grown-ups who believed children should just be kids, and the very real possibility of heartbreak if the dream faltered. Yet they never once told her to stop. They wrapped their arms around her vision and said, "We're with you." The road to making it real was steep and unforgiving. Forming a non-profit at 9 years old was almost unheard of. Legal documents, tax-exempt status, board requirements, bylaws, terms that sounded cold and foreign to a child who still loved swinging on the playground. Applications were long and confusing. Rejections arrived in thick envelopes. Adults in offices looked at her over glasses and said gentle versions of "you're too young," or "this is too big for one little girl," or simply, "it's impossible." Each impossible landed like a stone on her heart. There were nights when Katie sat at the kitchen table, papers scattered around her, tears blurring the fine print. She would whisper to herself, voice trembling, "Why won't they believe in me?" But every time doubt crept in. She remembered the faces at the soup kitchen, the way a child's eyes had lit up over a simple bowl of soup. That memory became her shield, her strength. She wiped her tears, straightened her small shoulders, and kept going. Her parents fought alongside her, helping fill out forms, finding pro bono lawyers who believed in the cause, sitting through endless meetings where adults spoke over her head until she raised her hand and spoke with such clarity and passion that the room fell silent. Slowly, doors began to crack open. In 2009, after months of persistence that would have exhausted most adults, Katie's Crops was officially born, a non-profit, a legal entity, a dream made paper and possibility. The name was simple, perfect, crops for the crops she hoped would grow. Katie's, because this movement belonged to her, and now, she vowed, to every child who wanted to join. But the heart of Katie's Crops was a paperwork or tight, itite wabilief. It was the radical, beautiful idea that children are not just the future, they are powerful agents of change right now. The mission was breathtaking in its clarity. Equip young people with seeds, tools, knowledge, and encouragement to grow gardens of their own, then guide them to donate every harvest to those who hungered. Not as charity handed down from adults, but as gifts from one child to another community in need. Katie wanted every young gardener to feel what she had felt, the swell of pride when a seed breaks soil, the joy of watching green life unfurl, the deep, soul-shaking fulfillment of seeing that life become nourishment for someone else. The first garden bloomed at her school. Kérés hommes hésitants, some srilaient then they gurnafint rows of promise. They laughed as they dug, sang while they planted, cheered when the first tiny sprouts pushed through. When harvest arrived, they carried overflowing baskets to the soup kitchen. The recipients' faces lit up again, this time not from one girl's cabbage, but from the shared labor of many young hands. Katie stood among her friends, watching gratitude wash over the crowd, and felt her heart expand until it seemed it might burst. Tis kain waf soul will boy, and of radiant. This was it. This was the beginning. Word traveled like wildfire. Children across towns, then states, heard her story. Letters poured in, handwritten notes from kids saying, "I want to do that too." Teachers emailed, asking how to start. Katie answered everyone. She seed packets, sample guide, small grind determination. She spoke at schools, her voice steady and warm. You don't have to wait until you're grown up to matter. Plan what shit gives. That's how the world changes one brave, beautiful act at a time. Skeptics watched in astonishment as gardens multiplied, backyard plots, school courtyards, community centers, even balcony containers in cities. Children who had never touched soil before learned to nurture life. They learned patience waiting for sprouts, resilience when storms flattened rows, empathy when they delivered crates of fresh produce to shelters and food banks. They learned that their hands, small as they were, could ease real hunger. Katie never stopped being moved by their stories. A handwritten thank you from a child who said, "My garden fed my whole neighborhood." Photos of grinning kids holding giant zucchini beside soup kitchen volunteers. Letters that began, "Because of you, I know I can make a difference." Each one landed in her heart like sunlight, reminding her why she had fought so hard. Through exhaustion, doubt, late nights, and the endless work of growing something this big, Katie held fast to the flame that had been kindled in that soup kitchen years before. She had seen what one child could do. Now, she was witnessing what hundreds, thousands of children could do when they believed in themselves and in each other. Katie's Crops wasn't just an organization. It was a revolution of the heart. A living proof that age is no barrier to love in action. A chain of compassion stretching from one backyard in South Carolina to gardens across the country and beyond. A reminder, whispered through every sprout and every shared meal, that the smallest among us carry the greatest power, the power to grow hope, to feed bodies and souls, to change the world one garden, one child, one courageous dream at a time. From one humble backyard in Somerville, South Carolina, a single spark of compassion burst into a wildfire of hope that raced across the country and far beyond. Katie's Crops didn't merely grow. It erupted with breathtaking, heart-pounding momentum. Children everywhere felt the pull of Katie's story deep in their bones. They saw her on screens, read her words in school assemblies, clutched letters from her in trembling hands, and whispered to themselves, if she could do that, maybe I can too. I want to grow something that matters. I want to feed someone who's hungry. Every new message that reached Katie felt like a heartbeat, joining hers, young voices rising together, saying, we are ready, we believe. L'es-tu Essine? She answered with everything she had: open arms, tireless energy, and a belief in them fiercer than any adult doubt. Seed packets arrived like promises in the mail. Small grants felt like lifelines. Simple guides became maps to empowerment. Katie didn't just send things, she sent courage. She stayed up late replying to emails from nervous first-timers, celebrated every fragile sprout with the same electric joy she'd felt over her own cabbage years before. Gardens exploded into life in places she had never set foot. Sun-scorched Texas backyards heavy with golden squash. Rain-drenched Oregon plots brimming with emerald bok choy and kale. Cracked Chicago schoolyards reborn as green sanctuaries where city kids discovered the miracle of soil between their fingers. By her mid-20s, the movement had reached gardens in 33 states, with over 100 active, youth-led gardens, and had poured more than 800,000 pounds of fresh, vibrant produce into food banks, shelters, cancer wards, veterans' homes, and families on the edge. Those weren't just numbers, they were thousands of warm meals shared, thousands of empty plates filled, thousands of weary faces suddenly bright with gratitude and surprise. Every pound carried the heartbeat of a child who had dared to believe they could help. Katie's Crops built a scholarship program that felt like a sacred pact. Apply with your dream. Receive the seeds, tools, knowledge, and mentorship you need and promise to keep growing, keep giving. These weren't one-time projects. They were lifelong friendships with the earth and with those who hungered. Some gardens stood strong for over a decade, growing side by side with the children who first planted them. Katie visited when she could, joined harvest celebrations on video calls, wept happy tears reading letters that began, because of you. I know I'm not too small to change things. The organization became a living, breathing family bound by dirt under fingernails, calloused palms, and the unbreakable vow to never let hunger win. The stories these young growers created still have the power to stop your breath with their beauty and bravery. In Salem, Oregon, 8-year-old Mayu Lung read Katie's story and felt something ignite inside her. With her family, she transformed a neglected church lot into a thriving garden of bok choy, kale, carrots, and towering cabbages. They donated faithfully, watching joy bloom on faces at at local pantries. Then came the night that broke her heart. Thieves stole everything: the giant cabbage she had guarded like treasure, the rose she had watered at dawn, the harvest she had dreamed of sharing. Mayu stood before the ravaged beds, chest heaving, tears streaming down her face. The pain was raw, the sense of violation deep. She had given her all and it had been taken. For a moment, the world felt too heavy for small shoulders. But Mayu had learned from Katie, love doesn't surrender. With shaking hands and a voice thick with tears, she told her family, "We're planting again. We're not done. The next season, the garden roaring back more beautiful, more abundant." When they delivered the new harvest, the recipients embraced them, tears mingling with their tears of shared pain, shared triumph, shared unbreakable hope. Mayu's story became sacred within the movement, a living testament that even when the world steals your harvest, you can grow it back stronger, brighter, more defiant. In Florida, a brother and sister team turned their backyard into a year-round miracle. Starting as little kids, they worked through blisters, heat, exhaustion, growing crops in every season, donating thousands upon thousands of pounds to veterans, Marines, families in crisis. Over £12,000 in one unforgettable year. Their pride burned like sunlight on ripening tomatoes. Their story became a rallying cry. If two kids can feed thousands, imagine what all of us can do together. Across the nation, New York classrooms, California patios, Midwest community centers, children woke up to their own power. They learned patience in the slow miracle of germination, resilience when storms flattened rows or pests devoured leaves, empathy when they carried heavy crates to shelters and saw tears of relief in eyes that had forgotten how to hope. Shy voices grew bold. Parents watched their children stand taller, speak with fire. Teachers witnessed students who once drifted now leading with purpose. Communities tasted the change, fresher food on shelves, fuller bellies, quieter nights knowing help had arrived from the smallest hands. Yet no dream this big escapes storms. Drought turned soil to dust in the southwest. Floods drowned hope in the southeast. Pests descended like dark clouds. Theft and vandalism struck again and again, leaving young growers staring at empty beds they had loved and tended with their whole hearts. Funding wavered. Donations slowed. Exhaustion crept in. Katie herself faced nights when the weight felt crushing, balancing college classes with an organization that grew faster than she could sometimes breathe. Doubt whispered in the dark. What if we can't keep up? What if it's too much? Tears fell in silence as she wondered if the flame could survive. But in those shadowed moments, she returned to the beginning, the soup kitchen, the faces, the first tears of awakening. She reached out to her growers, held space for their grief, listened to their fears. Together, they reminded one another, setbacks are not endings. They are the deep soil where stronger roots grow. They replanted with fiercer love-raised beds against floods. Clever planting to outsmart pests. Community rebuild days where neighbors turned loss into unity and tears into laughter. Every scar became strength. Every loss, fertilizer for greater harvests. Through every soaring high and every tear-soaked low, Katie's crops revealed the most radiant truth: when children lead with open hearts and unbreakable will. Miracles are not rare, they are inevitable. One sprout defies winter. One harvest mends a hungry night. One shared meal restores dignity, kindles joy, and proves that hope is something you can plant, tend, and harvest together. By the time Katie stood as a young woman now in her mid-20s, university books in one hand, the future of thousands in the other, the movement had become a force of nature. Gardens glowed across the map like beacons of what is possible when belief meets action. When young hearts refuse to accept impossible, when kindness is grown deliberately, fiercely, lovingly. The number's over 100 gardens in 33 states, more than £800,000 donated, lives forever touched were staggering. But the true measure was in the eyes, children who discovered they were powerful beyond measure. Communities that tasted love in every bite, a world reminded that the greatest revolutions begin not with armies, but with small hands holding seeds and refusing to let go of hope. As the years unfolded, Katie Stogliano grew from that wide-eyed 9-year-old kneeling in the dirt into a young woman whose quiet fire had ignited something unstoppable across the nation. Katie's crops was no longer a single garden or even a handful of them. It had become a living heartbeat of hope, pulsing through communities, schools, and hearts, quietly proving that the fight against hunger could be won not with grand institutions, but with small hands holding seeds and refusing to give up. In the wealthiest country in the world, hunger still hid in plain sight. 1 in 8 households, millions of children, parents, grandparents went to bed wondering if tomorrow would bring enough. Fresh fruits and vegetables, the very building blocks of health and energy, were luxuries many could not afford. Processed food became the default. Empty calories filled stomachs, while bodies quietly starved for what they truly needed. Katie had seen the human cost up close in that humble soup kitchen years ago, the tired eyes that brightened at the first warm spoonful, the trembling hands that clutched a bowl like a lifeline, the soft thank you that carried a lifetime of silent struggle. Those moments had carved themselves into her soul. She never forgot. She never stopped feeling the ache. Katie's crops answered that ache with something radically simple and profoundly powerful: fresh, sun-kissed produce grown by children, harvested with love, delivered straight into hungry hands. No long supply chains, no corporate distance, just earth, rain, sunlight, and the pure intention of young hearts transformed into nourishment. Every tomato handed over carried a silent promise: you are not invisible, your hunger matters. Someone cared enough to grow this for you. The gardens became more than food sources, they became sanctuaries of connection. Neighbors who had never spoken now worked side by side, laughing as they pulled weeds together. Schools partnered with shelters, turning playground edges into thriving rows of greens. Churches opened forgotten corners to young planters. Cancer patients received baskets of crisp lettuce and sweet peppers from local youth gardens, their faces lighting up with unexpected joy. Veterans mentored children on how to plant with purpose, finding healing in passing on knowledge. Families in crisis opened their doors to find crates of zucchini, carrots, and kale waiting gifts from kids they had never met, yet who had somehow known they needed this act of care. Recognition arrived like a gentle tide that grew into a wave. Katie became the youngest recipient of the Clinton Global Citizen Award. Stepping onto a stage surrounded by world changers, her voice steady, yet trembling with the weight of what it all meant. The Gloria Barron Prize for Young Heroes wrapped her in honor for the courage she carried every day. Sodexo's Stop Hunger Scholar Award celebrated her as a relentless warrior against food insecurity. The Jane L. Taylor Award from the American Horticultural Society acknowledged how she had turned the simple act of gardening into a weapon of justice and love. Presidents spoke her name with respect. Magazines called her a beacon. Universities invited her to speak. And audiences sat spellbound as this young woman, still so humble, reminded them that leadership isn't about age or titles. It's about refusing to look away from suffering and choosing to act instead. Yet, through every spotlight, every standing ovation, Katie remained anchored to the same truth that had started it all. The awards were beautiful, they brought resources, visibility, momentum, but they were never the heart of the matter. The heart was still the faces, the child tasting a fresh strawberry for the first time and grinning ear to ear. The grandmother, whose hands shook with gratitude over ripe tomatoes. The father, who could finally sit down to dinner with his family without the knot of worry in his chest. Those moments were the real awards, the ones that made every sleepless night, every doubt, every tear worth it. Balancing the dream with group, a rock battle. University classes, exams, late-night study sessions wove together with conference calls, grant deadlines, garden check-ins, and messages from young growers facing their own storms. There were days when exhaustion felt like a physical weight pressing on her chest, days when she wondered how one heart could hold so many responsibilities without breaking. Nights when she lay awake, staring into the dark, whispering to herself, "Am I enough? Can I keep carrying this while I'm still figuring out my own life?" In those vulnerable hours, she returned again and again to the beginning, the backyard soil. The tiny seedling, the soup kitchen steam, the tears that had first cracked her heart open to possibility. She reached out to her growers, listened to their triumphs, held space for their fears, drew strength from their courage. They reminded her this was never meant to rest on one pair of shoulders. It belonged to every child who had ever planted a seed and felt the swell of purpose. Every recipient who had ever received a harvest and felt seen. Every person who had believed, even for a moment, that change was possible. She learned to protect her own heart, to walk in nature when the world felt too loud, to laugh with friends, to let family hold her when she needed it most. She discovered that to keep giving light, she had to let herself receive it too. And through every challenge, her vision only grew brighter, fiercer, more luminous. She dreamed of a day when every school had its own garden, not as a nice extra, but as a core part of learning what it means to be human, to nurture, to share, to care. She envisioned neighborhoods where hunger was met not with shame or distance, but with overflowing baskets grown by the hands of the children who lived there. She believed down to the marrow of her being that young people were not waiting for the future. They were building it right now, one deliberate seed, one stubborn sprout, one shared meal at a time. Kids aren't the leaders of tomorrow, she would say, voice thick with emotion, eyes shining. They are the leaders of today. And when we trust them, when we give them soil and seeds and belief, they show us what is truly possible. The impact stretched far beyond pounds of produce. It reshaped how adults looked at children, not as future potential, but as present power. It challenged communities to reimagine solutions to hunger, not as distant programs, but as living, breathing, youth-led movements rooted in empathy, action, and love. It proved that when compassion is planted with intention and tended with devotion, it grows into something strong enough to feed bodies, heal spirits, bridge divides, and remind the world that no one is too small to matter. In her quietest moments, Katie sometimes returned to that backyard in Somerville. She would kneel, touch the same soil where her first cabbage had taken root, and let tears fall, not of sadness, but of overwhelming, radiant gratitude. She had a vast, living forêt. And that forest was still expanding leaf by leaf, garden by garden, heart by heart, toward a world where hunger was no longer a shadow, but a memory overcome by the unstoppable light of young, determined love. And now, as we stand in 2026, Katie Stagliano, now a woman in her mid-20s, still serving as founder and chief executive gardener, continues to lead with the same fierce compassion that started it all. Katie's Crops is thriving, over 100 gardens strong across 33 states. More than 800,000 pounds of fresh produce donated, and new initiatives blooming for the year ahead. In the low country of South Carolina, 2 new youth-based gardens are launching with support from partners like Big Green, each equipped with raised beds, irrigation, soil, seeds, and ongoing mentorship for young growers ages 8 and up. Monthly community dinners serve hundreds, with record harvests from the flagship garden, feeding families through food pantries, senior centers, and direct outreach. Applications pour in for new growers, and the organization's wish list reflects its humble, practical heart: a truck for transport, a chest freezer, seeds, hoses, simple tools to keep the mission moving forward. Katie's story is not just a beautiful tale from the past. It is a mirror held up to every single one of us. It whispers a truth we sometimes forget: the power to change the world does not belong only to the famous, the wealthy, the grown-up. It belongs to you, right now, in this very moment. It lives in the quiet stirring of your heart when you see someone hurting, in the impulse to reach out, in the simple decision to care even when the task feels too big, even when your hands feel too small. Look at the children who followed Katie's light. See their faces glowing with pride as they pull the first ripe tomato from the vine, their small fingers stained with earth and joy. Watch them load heavy baskets with trembling excitement, knowing these vegetables will soon become warm meals for someone who needs them. Hear the soft gasps of gratitude when a weary mother receives a crate of fresh greens, or an elderly man smiles through tea beside the sight of crisp, a kid's hilnavime. These are not children pretending to make a difference. These are young souls already living the deepest truth of humanity, that love, when planted and tended, becomes abundance, that giving does not diminish us, it multiplies us. That every child who plants a seed is planting hope for someone else's tomorrow. And look at those who receive the harvest. See the father who sits down to dinner with his family for the first time in weeks, without the knot of worry in his chest. See the child whose eyes widen at the taste of a sun-ripened strawberry, fresh, real, alive. See the grandmother whose loneliness is softened by the knowledge that somewhere young strangers cared enough to grow food just for her. In every bite, their nourishment. They taste dignity restored. They taste connection across miles and years. They taste the quiet miracle of knowing they are not forgotten. This is the breathtaking power of Katie's story. It reveals the seed of hope that already lives inside you. It may feel buried beneath doubt, beneath the rush of daily life, beneath the voice that says, "I'm just one person. What can I do?" But Katie proved beyond any shadow of doubt that one person is enough. One child is enough. One tearful moment of compassion is enough to start a revolution of kindness. She didn't wait for permission. She didn't wait to grow up. She simply said yes to the ache in her heart, and the world has never been the same. You do not need a 40-pound cabbage. You do not need a non-profit or a stage or a spotlight. You need only the courage to begin. Every small act is a seed. Every seed carries within it the promise of a harvest. You may never fully see, but someone will. Someone will taste it. Someone will be fed by it. Someone will feel seen, valued, loved because you dared to plant. The world does not change because a handful of giants decide to move mountains. It changes because ordinary people like you, Like me, like the 9-year-old, Katie once was, choose to care fiercely, to act bravely, to keep going when the soil is hard and the storms come. So really listen to the quiet voice inside you. The one that stirs when you see suffering. The one that whispers, "What if I could help?" Trust that voice. Honor it. Let it guide your hands into the soil of your own life. Because the truth Katie discovered in that humble soup kitchen still burns bright today. You are never too small. You are never too late. You are never without power. Close your eyes for just a moment. Picture it. Endless rows of vibrant green stretching toward the sun. Children laughing as they harvest. Families gathering around tables filled with food grown with love. Hear the gentle rustle of leaves in the breeze, the soft clink of spoons against bowls, the quiet, grateful murmurs of those receiving the bounty. Feel the warmth of a world slowly healing itself, one seed, one act, one heart at a time. That future is not a distant dream. It is already unfolding because one girl dared to plant a seed, and thousands more dared to believe they could do the same. Now, it is your turn. The seed is in your hand. What will you grow? Start today. Start right now, with whatever you have. With the love that already lives inside you. Because somewhere, someone is waiting for the harvest only you can provide. And when that harvest comes, when a plate is filled, when a face lights up with gratitude, when hope takes root in a heart that had almost given you weakness, deep in your soul, what kind all those years, one small act of love can feed the world. Thank you for joining this journey through the story of Seeds of Hope, the journey of Katie Stogliano, from one tiny cabbage seedling in 2008 to more than 800,000 pounds of fresh produce shared, over 100 gardens planted across 33 states, and countless hearts inspired by the kindness of children. This is proof that one small act can truly change the world. And the most beautiful part? The seed of hope is still waiting for you to plant it. You don't have to be Katie to make a difference. Start small today. Grow a pot of herbs on your balcony. Share a meal with someone in need. Donate to a local food bank. Support an organization fighting hunger like Katie's Crops. Visit katieskrops.com to learn more. Donate, or apply to start a garden, or simply pass this story on to one more person who needs to hear it. If this story moved you, here's what I'd love for you to do right now. Like, if it touched your heart. Comment below, what's one small thing I'm going to do? Share your first step and inspire others. Share this with at least one friend, because one seed can start an entire garden. Let's keep planting seeds of hope together. You are never too small to make a real difference. Thank you for being here. The world grows brighter with every act of kindness.